Now, the latest on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak is in Australia, meeting with his Australian counterpart and getting a first-hand look at the massive search effort. We're expecting to hear from him shortly. He's expected to have a news conference there in Perth. In fact, they may be coming out at any moment, and when they do, we'll bring it to you live. Meantime, planes are back in the air for another day of searching, and more ships are joining the effort off the coast of Perth, Australia. And there are new search areas targeted. Joining me now for more on the mystery surrounding Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is Seth Kaplan. He's managing partner with Airline Weekly. Seth, give me your latest assessment on things. I know we've had a chance to talk in the past. We've talked about the weather. We've talked about the mystery surrounding this thing. What is the most daunting phase right now, would you say, for these searchers?
Well, Mike, as you know, just a few days left for any hope to find the black boxes, the cockpit voice and data recorders. While they still might be emitting the sonar signal, powered, of course, by a battery that's expected to last just 30 days. To be clear, by the way, that's not to say that on the 31st day it'll automatically turn off, but it's only rated for 30 days. So very much a race against the clock, and it's really more a product of hope than of any realistic possibility to think that that's going to happen. Things are only getting more difficult, not easier, as time goes on, without any new evidence about where this aircraft might be.
It brings to mind the search for the Air France after the Air France disaster, and that was in the Atlantic, but they had a pretty good idea of where it was, and that still took a lengthy period of time, didn't it?
Almost 2 years, Mike, and then another year to really figure out what had happened. And that an incident, as you said, much less of a mystery than this one. An incident where, first of all, you didn't apparently have whoever was at the controls trying to make it so that we all couldn't know what happened. You had an aircraft emitting distress signals, an aircraft that we knew had flown into bad weather. And so again, although it took years to figure out exactly what had happened, we knew a lot more going in. We saw debris and even bodies floating just days after that crash. In this case, of course, we only now finally know in what part of the world we're supposed to be looking. And we'll see in a few moments what the Prime Minister says. But again, it would be more hope than any kind of realistic expectation to think that he's going to say anything that's really going to give us confidence that we're going to know something more soon.
And Seth, you say we sort of have an idea of where it is, but we're still looking at something the size of Britain, aren't we?
Right, exactly, Mike. Again, if you go back to the Air France crash, and it really is the best modern example, only because that was another crash where you had a debris field, perhaps 10,000 feet underwater and so forth, those kinds of similarities. And yet there, it took those 2 years, even though we knew pretty much where it went down. You're talking about being off by perhaps a couple hundred yards rather than a couple hundred miles or more in this case, which may still be the situation. So absolutely, there is no comparison, to be clear. And we, as analysts, as journalists, you and I, just try to grasp for what we can compare this to. There must be some precedent. That's the tendency. And in this case, all of us sort of coming to the terms with the fact that there really is no precedent, really no other example with a commercial airliner like this, where a month later we had so little idea of even where it was, let alone what happened.
We know the assets that are being used as well. There are a lot of planes, a lot of boats out there. If you were to look at the technology that's available for this search, what would you say is the most critically important at this stage?
Well, at this particular stage, the fact that, finally those assets, as you said, being moved into place that could detect those sonar pings, essentially the signal being emitted, presumably still by the black boxes that would help us find those black boxes. So for the next several days, Mike, while there is still some hope of finding them, and I don't want to overstate the case in terms of how much hope there is, but while there is still that little bit of hope, that's the most important thing. But then beyond that, we'll be looking at more of a side scanning sonar operation is what it's called. It's a rather different kind of sonar where you're basically taking pictures broadly of the ocean floor, as opposed to this very localized kind of listening for this sonar signal, which is what they're doing right now. And so barring what you could almost only call a miracle in the next several days, that's what it'll become, an operation of really scanning the ocean floor. Again, though, there is a scenario where we're still talking years from now rather, about where this plane might be, because again, we can only mention the Air France crash where we knew so much more, and that took 2 years. So it'll take certainly all the skill and all of the technology that's being correctly employed here, but quite frankly, also a little bit of luck.
All right, Seth, we're going to have to leave it there.